Hey everyone, this is John Puritz. Welcome to the Man Up Already podcast. This show is dedicated to each of us being better in all areas of our lives, mentally, spiritually, physically, and relationally. We want to help you be a better you because when you man up already, the world around you is greatly impacted. Here on the podcast, we don't believe you're an accident. We believe each of us is created for purpose, and this show is dedicated to helping you discover and live out that purpose. Again, welcome to the show, and let's check out another great episode. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Man Up Already podcast. As always, super excited to have you here. And if this is your first time, I always like to explain, Man Up Already. Sometimes people say, oh, that's a negative connotation, or that's an ancient slogan. Well, really what we're talking about is mankind, and it is men and women. It is a way of saying, get up, right? Keep moving forward, right? When you're down, pick yourself up. You've got a divine purpose. You're created for purpose. Let's get after it and keep going. And that's what Man Up Already stands for. And if it's your first time, or for those of you that keep returning, if you have not hit the like button, please like the episode. If you're not subscribing on YouTube, please do so. If you're not following us on your podcast platform, please do so as well. We really appreciate it. So as of this recording, we are 1 week away from Thanksgiving. And, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. I just love this time of year. I definitely love this week because I like to call it Gratitude Week. It's like Gratitude Month, definitely Gratitude Week, but we are 1 week away from Thanksgiving. And I was reminded how important, right? I think this time of year really shows us how important gratitude is. It's like the secret ingredient. There's a great book out there. I forget her name, Rhonda Byrne, I think it is, who wrote The Secret. But there's another book called, oh my gosh, I'm totally spacing the book. I'll remember it at some point. But The Magic. And it's all about gratitude. It's really a phenomenal book and exercises to get gratitude in your life, to give gratitude, to give, and the power of giving and how it comes back. So gratitude really is the magic, if you will. It's the secret ingredient. And then I was thinking about 1 Thessalonians 5:18 that says, in anything, give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. In everything, give thanks, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus. So give thanks, right? It shouldn't be a month. It shouldn't be a week, but it is this month and this week. So, right, give thanks in everything. It's Thanksgiving. Give thanks. Don't get distracted by the red cups at Starbucks and the trees and all that. And I didn't go on a tangent this year where normally I'll be like screaming, respect the turkey, right? Christmas gets set up on Black Friday, but a lot of people have a challenge with that. And I don't apologize for that. It's just, my belief, like, don't skip over Thanksgiving. I understand you could be distracted by the twinkly lights, but give thanks. And I saw on a cooking show recently how this host of the cooking show on Food Network had decorated for Thanksgiving. And I was like, ooh, see, now that I can get behind. I can get behind fall colored lights and leaves and pumpkins and wreaths and all of that for Thanksgiving. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. So anyway, I went on a little bit of tangent, but I do love Thanksgiving, and in everything, give thanks. Hey, our guest today is a 2-time best-selling author. He is the host of the Learnit podcast, the CEO of Learnit, which is a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. He's a former Division I baseball player, and he has a passion for leadership, learning, and growth. Please welcome today's guest, Damon Lembi. All right, Damon, welcome to the Man Up Already podcast. Good to have you.
John, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, we were just chatting a little bit before, but I'm super pumped for our conversation. I think there's a lot of synergy in kind of where we're at. But I do appreciate, the opportunity for us to have the conversation. I think it's important.
I totally agree with you.
I gave the intro, and you're up to some big things. So 2-time best-selling author, you got your own podcast, which is always fun to interview podcast hosts because they just get it right. Like you know how to have a conversation. So it'll be fun. You're running your own company, which I think, if I read properly, was something that you did with your dad, or your dad started. Like, what's that story?
So that story is my family was a big real estate family in San Francisco, one of the biggest for quite a while. And in the mid 90s, my dad, who you would have loved, a big entrepreneur, was trying to find a way to digitize our family real estate portfolio. Computers were just coming out, really. He went and got a Mac, and he's like, took a class. He dragged one of my sisters to a CompUSA class in San Francisco. I was in school. John, he thought it was terrible. He thought it was sterile environment. Somebody read from a book, and he said, there's just got to be a better way to do this. And he walked out after an hour, called the guy who used to be a CFO at our savings and loan we had. And he's like, I want to have classes that are short. I want them taught by musicians. I want them to be inexpensive so anybody could come. And really, that's where Learnit started 29, 30 years ago. And I was just, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I was finishing up my baseball career, and those two things and this was June of 95, kind of dated myself, but those two things just kind of came together right then.
It's, you're talking, what a visionary, right? 95. I remember Windows 95, right? Like none of this stuff, right? None of the stuff that we have right now even was a thought back then. So that's so amazing that he had that creative vision.
Yeah, no, funny.
Pretty awesome.
Quick little funny story about that is we passed out a lot of flyers back in the day. That was kind of one of our things, and and he liked to create them. I don't know why, but he printed out like 10,000 Windows 95 flyers, and he forgot the D in Windows. And I'm like, oh my God. And he's just like, pass them out anyways. I'm like, oh. But that's what I remember about Windows 95 is the missing D.
That's funny. And, we were talking earlier, and so, the podcast is obviously about fulfilling what I call your created purpose, right? Like discovering it and moving through it. Life is a journey, and along the way, adversity comes. I think that's ultimately how you and I got connected, was just on that topic. But you and I have something in common, that we both lost our dads at our age of 38, and both were 63 when that happened. So I want to kind of dive into who was because it sounds like your dad was very much like my dad, right? Super influential, etc. Tell me about that experience and just kind of what your takeaways were from it.
So yes, my dad was my best friend. I idolized him. So in August of 2009, and he didn't take good care of himself, John. He wasn't a big drinker, but he was super stressed and he didn't eat well. He was overweight. And he calls me up one day, August 2009, and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm working. What do you think I'm doing? And he said, I got fucking cancer. Then I was like, what? And he said, yeah, I just went and I was diagnosed with stage 4 stage 4 cancer. It's escaping my mind for a second. Esophagus cancer. And I was obviously taken aback. And we got together. He's like, I don't want to tell anybody. I want you to tell everybody for me. I'm too upset. So I, as the oldest of 4 kids, I went and saw my brothers and sisters and my mom. And so we had a talk. And the thing about it was, I don't know what it was like first for your dad, is he didn't really realize anything was wrong other than he couldn't keep food down. So we talked about it. And he really wanted to live, and he went the chemo route, and it at first it worked, then it didn't work. I went to all the appointments with him, And I'll never forget, John, being in the room with this doctor who didn't have any bedside manner really. And it was, I get it. And she just said, hey, you're going to have to get your everything in line because you probably have 6 months left to live. And he's like, I don't want to, I want to live. And so he went the surgery route. He tried the surgery route. That turned into being a mess. He never left the hospital. He fought. I couldn't be more proud how much he fought. And it was really tough for me. I didn't really know how to deal with it too well. So I kind of drank a lot. You know what I mean? To deal with the pain. But I was there every day, and everybody kind of deals with things differently. I was there with him every day. He aspirated, got pneumonia. He was in the hospital for probably 9 months, John. For a year. He basically died a year. Well, he died a year to the month that he was diagnosed. And by the time he actually passed away, I was okay with it by then because it was a foregone conclusion. But I was really proud with how he fought. And I just realized that I never wanted to go down that way. I wouldn't wish pancreatic cancer like your father or esophagus cancer, what my dad had, on anybody. It was just absolutely miserable.
Yeah. It's I'm just reminded of so many things. It's crazy, the connection or the coincidence of it. Because for me, I remember where I was when that call came. I was at SeaWorld. I remember what I was looking at when that call came. And for my dad, it was a month and a half, and part of me is grateful that it wasn't like you experienced a year, but that when you lose your hero, when you lose that influential person, and when you're in your, mid to later 30s, we've cursed twice, so we can just label this episode explicit,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know. If
no. It's okay. That's the Man Up Already podcast. Like, what the fuck do you know at 38 years old? You know nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
I just got goosebumps when you said that. Yeah.
You just, and now you're kind of left to figure it out. And you had a company, or he had a company. So because you've taken that and have grown that and done things with that. So what happened? Like, how did that then transpire?
Well, it's, Learnit, that I've been the CEO at for 29 years. My dad never worked here. It was his idea. It was his brainchild. Like I said, that's a whole nother story. We were a large real estate company, and everything kind of came crashing down the same year, 2009 with the recession. And my grandfather is still alive and, 98, 100 years old, who's like kind of the matriarch of all this. And so it was a double whammy. I lost my dad, my best friend. And then during that time, we also lost almost our entire over $1 billion portfolio in real estate. But I don't care about that. I would have rather just had my dad. But yeah, that was that.
Course.
That was a tough, challenging time. I think we all have stuff like that. And that rough time, just like for you and like and other people. I think the difference between me and you is I had a year to come to the conclusion that I was losing my dad, and for you, obviously a month and a half. That, things really sped up. So I guess that was the advantage of my point.
The other thing that I wanted to chat with you on, obviously, because we had that commonality and how that molds and it shapes you. It's very easy for here on the podcast, we tend to kind of talk about men and their heroes, all those impacts. But I think as human beings, right, there's adversity shows up and you can't avoid it. It's just part of life, right? Like, things show up, you've got to deal with them, you got to navigate them. And you talked about being a Division I ball player, right, in college. And I'm guessing that, like, when you're, teens and 20s, early, that's the dream, right? Like, I would imagine you didn't expect to be CEO of a company if you're playing ball at a high level. Maybe you could tell that story, because obviously God has bigger plans. That's not what you ended up doing, but that dream kind of ended. So talk about maybe a little bit of that career for you and what that was, and then what the transition was and how you process that.
Well, I'll start by saying I never in my wildest dreams imagined I'd be where I'm at today in the learning and development field. I mean, I was
Yeah.
never a good student. I didn't like studying, And so my story is I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was really fortunate to have great parents. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, as I mentioned. All my buddies were athletes. We had a great peer group, great parents that they had. It was during baseball, it was baseball, football, soccer, tennis, whatever. And by my sophomore year in high school, John, I realized that if I was going to play in college or pro, my ticket was baseball,
Mm.
And so I went all in on baseball, and I worked really hard, and it worked out for me. My senior year, I was a high school All-American. I made the junior Olympic team, and I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round. And that was really my first big decision. Do I go the professional route where you go to the minor league someplace in Pulaski, West Virginia, or do you I had a full ride to Pepperdine University in Malibu. My parents were super cool. They said, "Hey, you got yourself here. We will support whatever decision you want to do." And I ended up going the college baseball route because, and this was like my first big leadership lesson, I had a Hall of Fame coach there named Andy Lopez, and Pepperdine's a small school, 2,500, 3,000 students. And when he recruited me, he said, "Damon, you're going to be a middle of the lineup hitter, starting third baseman, and we're going to win the College World Series within 2 years."
Mm.
And most people, John, thought he was nuts, right? Like, how do you go up against ASU or Louisiana State or whatever? But I really bought into it, and I loved what he had to say. And so I went that route. And right before I got to Pepperdine, I played in the Olympic Festival. That's the festival before the year of the Olympics, and I had a terrible series. I went like 2 for 14. So I go into Pepperdine, my confidence is down, and I really struggled for the first time in my life with imposter syndrome, because everybody is the best of the best out there. I didn't want to go to practice. I was unsure. I had a lot of limiting beliefs, self-doubt. And I remember like it was yesterday, we had our first player coach meeting in the fall, kind of like a performance review. I walk into his office and I sit down. And before I even sit down in my seat, John, Andy Lopez leans forward and he says to me, "Hey, Damon, when we recruited you, we did so because we believed that you had what it took to be a star third baseman for Pepperdine, and a huge asset to our team." Then he crossed his arms and he sat back and he said, "Son, you don't have what it takes to play Division I baseball. You're not talented enough." And he just looked right at me. And I'm sure you could imagine, how you'd feel if somebody said that, to you. And it was like, how do I get out of here? I just want to, I want to get on a bus and go home.
Right.
And before I had a chance to respond, he leaned forward again, pointed at me, and he said, "That's not what we think of you. We see the talent in you. Coach Springman, hitting coach, thinks you're a great hitter." He said, "The problem is it's in your head. It's in your head. And until you get out of your head and, you work hard and you put in the work and you stop with these limiting beliefs, there's really nothing we can do for you." And I would like to say that I left his office that day and immediately turned things around. I mean, it made me feel good that he said that. It was a roundabout way to get there. But I got hurt and I went to a junior college, played there. And then I got an opportunity again I got a full ride to Arizona State. But by the way, Pepperdine won the World Series, John, that year. Incredible,
Wow.
So that just shows you that you could set moonshot goals and a vision and made it happen. So I get this full ride to Arizona State, and a lot of people I know are kind of like, "Don't go there. There's going to be 17 guys trying out for first base. And why don't you go to a small school, someplace you can play, get your degree, and move on with your life?" And I kind of said, "Screw it. This is my last shot." I've always seen myself, you were a musician. I always saw myself as a baseball player. So I'm like, I'm going to go all in and make this happen. And that's where I kind of built this, I call it like a 4-step framework for beating imposter syndrome, where step number one is I said, kind of label my fears. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is I go to Arizona State, I sit on the bench, or I don't make the team. All right, so what? At least I give it a shot. So once I realized that, it's not life-threatening, let's just go for it. So step number 2 is just work hard. I just busted my ass. I don't think there's any replacement for hard work. There's no hacks. I'm not saying, and I've used this my whole career in business too. I'm not saying you got to work 10 to 14 hours, but you got to put in the work. You got to put in the effort. The next step is focus and deliberate practice. In baseball, I had a hard time hitting curveballs. So I was the first guy out on the field every day, and my coach, John Pearson, would throw me 100 curveballs. So I just work on that. I just focus on that. In the business world, for those out there listening, let's say you're a keynote speaker and you're struggling on something. Focus on the one thing, get better at that, and move on. And then the final step is, in baseball terms, let go and learn. So when it's time to step into the box, stop worrying about technique. Realize that you've done all the work, you've done all the prep. Just learn and let go. Go up there and do the best you can do. You might strike out, you might hit the ball out of the park, might do something in between. But whatever you do, it's an opportunity to learn and get better. As well as, I just don't think, John, enough people give themselves a pat on the back for getting out of their comfort zone and trying.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's what I did, and that's that framework I did. And I've used it my whole life. I didn't know it. I ended up having a great career at Arizona State. I hit a home run in the College World Series. The next day was the Major League Draft. Long story short, I didn't get drafted, even though I thought I would get drafted for like my third time. And there I was, 22 years old, and my baseball career was over. I didn't know what to do.
Let's put a pause there because I want to know what then happened. But there's so much in what you just said. I'm intimately familiar with imposter syndrome, right? Like, this whole series that I've been working on here on the podcast has been really centered around living in the past, and how if you continue to live in the past, you're essentially, if you're living in the past, your past is in your present, you're creating your future, right? Which is just another iteration of your past. And what you talked about is just so key. So first off, I want to make sure I have the story right. Pepperdine believes in you, recruits you, right? Like, we're going to go win the World Series together. But because of adversity, because of some things, you didn't believe it in your head and you left, right? Even though the coach is saying, we believe in you, because you couldn't connect head and heart. That's how I refer to it, right? I heard the other day that revelation is really when your head and your heart connect, right? So it theoretically made sense, but at your cellular level, at your core level, right? Belief to me is in the body. That's where that action comes from. You create that energy. You couldn't make that connection and ended up having to leave.
Correct. I got hurt. I got hurt, and I couldn't play that year. Freak accident. I ruptured my spleen in a rundown in a practice game. But I did. I left. I was. I still was having a hard time coming to grips that that I belonged. That I was good enough.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But then somewhere along the way, that does connect, and I love the framework. Right? What is the fear? That's such a key thing, labeling the fear, because I think when you label it, when you get it out of the dark in your own mind, put it out in the light, you start to really see what's real and what's not.
Totally.
Right. Work hard. There's one of my favorite books is The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. It was written in 1911. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
No, I'll check it out.
It's just, he was so ahead of his time. And it's not just about getting rich financially. It really is being rich in life, but it's so incredible on the power of your mind. And one of the things he says in there is fill up the space that you're in. Right. And so working hard is, the misconception is I put in, 21 hours of hard work. I sleep 3 hours and I get up at 4 in the morning, and, I just cranked it out for, 5 years. And, if you just do that, that's a formula for success. That may work for some people. I don't think you have a life. I don't think you sacrifice health when you do that. But I think you can take some focused work, 2, 3, 4 hours, and get a lot of shit done in that time and be consistent about that, and
100%.
work hard when you're on, right? And enjoy or be present in your life when you're not in that moment. You know what I mean? I think there's a healthy balance, but when you're in that moment, fill up that space with all that you can be in that moment, right?
And that is so important, for your listeners out there, especially these days, because there's so many distractions, right? And the reason why I put that step in there, deliberate practice focus, is because it's hard. If something is tough, it's hard to stay focused on it. It's easy to go scroll on Instagram or check emails. And like we said, don't work 21 hours and only get 3 hours of sleep, because you're doing the exact opposite for yourself. But when you're going to put in the effort, be consistent and stay focused, and really, I don't know, put blinders on and just go all in on getting better at whatever it is you're trying to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you and I come from, we talked about it earlier, right? When you're in your 20s and you're in the 90s, right? Technology didn't have its influence the way it does today. But I remember, in my college days, especially, and it was the years that I was busting my ass to grow as a drummer shaped the next 30 to 40 years of my playing. Like, even today, I draw on what happened in a very short, really, the teacher that, and I think you'll relate to this and chime in however you'd like. In my senior year of college, so when I was 22 to 23, the most impactful teacher in my entire drumming life showed up. I had 1 year with him, maybe a year and a half, and that influenced everything that happened after that, because he was the one that made me lock myself in a practice room and practice, focused, for not out. I didn't put in, 5, 6 hours, but I definitely put in 2 to 3 of intense focus. And
Yeah.
and it happened in such a short period of time, but that short period of time can create decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels with your story and my story. I didn't realize that what I was, the first 22 years of my life playing sports and doing everything I did was, I like to call an athletic education, which would help benefit me my rest of my life. I thought I had no transferable skills. But what I'd like to point out is I was really fortunate, like you, where I had multiple coaches, not only a great dad, but from my high school coach to playing for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches. I had great role models that inspired me. And for everybody out there who's a father or mother, or, a leader of a team, I think it's really important, because a lot of these coaches they help you understand that you do have greatness inside of you, that you have achieved great things. And I think that's one of the most important things out there. I try to do as a leader is show my people that work for me that I believe in them. And when they don't see themselves being successful, I like to point out, hey, look, you've done this, this, and this, and I believe that you have a lot more in you. And I've had some of those experiences that's really helped me evolve. And on the flip side, and I'm curious if you've experienced it, I've also had some really shitty coaches, and you can learn just as much from them. And you really learn, like, I don't ever want to be like that guy,
Right.
I mean, and so you could learn a great deal from them as well.
Well, and really everything is a learning experience, it so often, and when I coach and work with people or speak, life is a journey. It's why I love that book, The Science of Getting Rich, so much. But even, I'm so faith-based, and I'm in the Bible every day. It's talked about all the time that life is constantly unfolding, that what you learn today through success or quote failure um, is going to shape what happens next, right? Like the mindset, and my next podcast episode is literally on this, is the mindset that you have today is not going to get you where you need to be next. You have to learn new things. Coaches, that's why, right? We're so, you and I both, I'm sure, are such big proponents on coaches and mentors, because they bring a level of awareness that you're never going to get by yourself. You know what I mean? Or if you're going to get it, it's going to be at a lower level than when somebody brings, they can say something, show you something, and next thing you know, you instantly level up your awareness, and then the universe brings you all kinds of options because of it, because you see things at a different level.
If you're open to seeing those things, though, John, I mean, I like to say it, the difference between being a learn-it-all and a know-it-all. A know-it-all is somebody who's got it all figured out. They have all the answers, nothing bothers them, and they're closed-minded, right? They have that mind, A learn-it-all, on the other hand, growth mindset, like that you surround yourself with great mentors, coaches, that you're taking courses, that you're listening to podcasts. You could learn something from everyone if you allow yourself to. I mean, there's somebody out there who's better at something than you. And if you're, I think it's just so important. You got to be curious, open-minded, and willing to try things too. But I couldn't agree more. Life's a learning journey. It's a journey, and you can learn as much from mistakes as you can from failures. And I think it's just important to who you surround yourself with, and learn from them.
So let's talk about that aspect of now your journey and what you do. Learnit has grown, right? You mentioned it, right? This Learn It All. You have a platform that teaches. You have a podcast about learning, but you also have this platform that's now skilling up, what you call upskill people. So talk about that and kind of what kind of work you're doing with that.
So Learnit is a B2B live learning platform, and companies turn to us when they want to upskill new managers. Let's say somebody gets promoted from an individual contributor to a new manager, and that's a completely different skill set. So we teach I don't like this term, but soft skills, emotional intelligence, how to be a better listener, conflict resolution. So we do that, or organizations who want to build a stronger learning culture and just want to have better communication. And so, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. We've upskilled, I don't know, like 2 million people, which is incredible to think that I've ever even been involved in something like, I mean, I went to Arizona State. I wasn't a huge student, but I've, at some point, I realized how important it was to read books, to learn. And I've really been passionate about it. All our trainings are, they used to be in person, but with COVID, obviously that pivoted. So we do about 85% on Zoom and 15% in person. And yeah, I mean, we work with companies all over the world, and typically with somebody in their HR department or business units, and we help design programs to help get to make the skill gap smaller. So if the team is struggling with hitting deadlines or communication, we figure out what's going on, and then we design programs to help them get better.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's funny, you mentioned some of those things: emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and I'm sitting here going, which is really what should be taught. I have a 25-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. And my 21-year-old son is still in college. And I'm just thinking, where are the courses? Conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, like those are the skills that you need in the real world. Yet you said two really important things. One, you have to want to, which I so take for granted, number one, because I think people who are listening to podcasts are those people. But how much the ego gets in the way, right? Thinking again that we've got it all together. But I had a conversation earlier with a friend, and I was like, that guy is never going to change. How he thinks is how he thinks. You can't get somebody to change. It's a choice, which you just said, right? And the only way to get to grow is to take on people. I'm kind of hitting this point relentlessly, but I think it's so key that technology today, with online learning, with what you're doing, there's no excuses anymore, right? If I want to level up as a drummer, and I'm still playing, I'm 54 years old, but if I want to, like, I'm playing music that I played back when I was in high school and college. So it's not a stretch for me to play this stuff. I do it because it's fun. But if I want to play today's music and what's expected of drummers today, I'm going to have to go back into the woodshed, right, and start honing the axe and chopping away and doing all that. That's a choice. But you can hop online now, learn things. There's so many ways to do it. There are no excuses if you want to be a better person.
Well, yeah. I mean, you said so many things there, and that's one thing where we are different. I got 2 kids, but I got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. So they're at the beginning. I got started late, but I love them, and my wife, of course, too. Now, the reason why things like self-awareness and conflict resolution and all those skills are so important these days, and it's so fortunate for Learnit that we do this, because with ChatGPT and just generative AI in general, a lot of those hard skills you're not going to need to learn how to program anymore. I mean, that's going to be done for you, but it's going to be a very long time, and I don't think in our lifetime where you're going to need self-awareness. I mean, I think that's like the most important thing for leaders, for anybody, is just to be self-aware. To have communication skills, to know how to collaborate. Those are things that I don't think you're going to be taken away from AI. And you have to put your ego aside and realize that I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything figured out. And set aside time, carve out time, whether it's listening to a podcast or reading, just be consistent of it and to continue to learn. It's just so important. I think knowledge is doubling every 12 hours or something like that. Wow. And because of that, I like to say, people are always like, oh, you do all the skill training. What do you think the most important skill is? What I like to say, I think the most important skill these days is really learning agility, the ability to know how to learn, learn, unlearn, forget things, get things off your plate and relearn. And that takes humility and vulnerability and flexibility, or whatever it is, right? To continue to learn and find some passions. Like at our work, I give everybody like a stipend to do learning and training, but not just on their skills that they need to do at Learnit. Go take something that interests you. Just get out there and want to continually learn and grow. I think otherwise you just get kind of stagnant and stale, and I just don't think that's. I don't know. It's not fun. It's not great. You get passed by. And last thing I'll say about it is I had a conversation with this guy I mentored the other day, and he called me up and he said that his boss told him that he talks too much and he doesn't, he's too aggressive. He's in sales. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I think you should say, thank you. Thank you for giving me that feedback, and let's make some adjustments. But instead, John, he just said, that's not how I am. He got really defensive. And unfortunately, people like that, I don't know what to say. I mean, they're just not going to change. And they lack self-awareness. And I just hope people can reflect back enough to make sure they're not that type of person, that they should be honored when somebody gives them feedback, that they accept it. And even if they don't believe all of it, there may be a grain of truth in there, and there's something that could always help you get better.
What comes to mind with everything that you just said is a choice, truly, on whether you're going to be a human being or a human becoming. Like if you're just you're being what you've always been. You don't need to learn shit, right? Check out on TikTok and good luck, right? But if you're a human becoming, then every moment is another opportunity to become more. And I think that really is what life is. I have these things that just come into my, that resonate with me. And obviously we're from the same generation. There's that line in Dead Poets Society on suck the marrow out of life. And if you're going to do that, you've got to be, I don't know, inquisitive about what's happening in life, right? To constantly learn, grow, to be able to see things for what they are. And I think one of the things about finding the sweetness of life is discovering things that were always there, but you couldn't see them before. Like I had a buddy of mine call me up, and I remember when I learned this. I learned this probably over 15 years ago, but he calls me up. He goes, "Let me ask you something. When you look at the FedEx logo, what do you see?" And so I'll ask you that, Damon. When you look at the FedEx logo, what's the first thing you see?
I don't know. The first thing I think about is Fred Smith, because I kind of know his story from FedEx, but I see, I guess, is it purple and orange?
So have you ever seen the arrow?
I'm sure I have, but yeah.
Right. So
is it pointing up?
No. So you've never
No?
seen the arrow. So that's the point, right?
Yeah.
He calls me up, he goes, "Did you ever see the arrow?" And I go, "Yeah." And I remember the first time somebody pointed out, and I was like, "You got to be freaking kidding me," right?
That's funny.
It's right in front of your face.
Now I gotta look at the arrow every time packages are showing up at my house all the time.
Right. But it's just this, oh my gosh, right? And that's an example of, man, I just didn't see it. It was right there, but it took a higher level of thought or a different thing. And I hit this before, but it's just so is true. It's like, are we human being and being present, and are we becoming something greater? And the enjoyment of life comes from them, even in adversity, right? I got hurt. I had to switch schools. My dad died, right? These things that come in life, they're gonna happen. Shit happens to everyone. But how do you look at it? Key right here. Do you look at adversity as the thing that is going to, derail you? Like life's over, it's a negative thing, or is adversity going to show up? And that's the thing that, as the Bible says, burns off the dross, right? There's a proverb that says, when you take silver and you burn off the impurities, that's what jewelry is made out of.
Yeah.
What's left.
I like that.
After you burn all that off. And that's what adversity does. It burns off a lot more of those impurities so that we can keep getting better, keep moving forward, which you in your life have clearly done. And I love that you're taking this platform and now using it to just enrich so many more people.
Yeah. I what I want to add to that is it's hard, adversity is hard, and everybody goes through something. It's just, and I'm sure you see this on your show, but like a lot of these great leaders or athletes that I get to speak with, they don't have a victim mentality. They're not playing the blame game. They're not blaming others. It's not life happening to us. It's life happening for us. Stuff comes up, shit comes up. You got to learn how to work within your constraints and make the best of it. And you got 2 kids. I have 2 kids. I just want to be a great role model for them, as well as my team. And show up every day in a way that's like, shit happens. Learnit's been through the .com bust, the Great Recession, COVID, all this stuff, but somehow we figured it out. You know what I mean?
You've seen a lot of things since the beginning of it.
Yeah. So you somehow you figure it out, and you just got to do the best you can do, and you got to have faith, whether you're spiritual or religious or whatever. You got to have faith that things will turn out okay. And a lot of times, if you try something and it doesn't work out, a lot of times the worst thing that happens is you just end up back to where you were anyways. So I'm just not a big fan of the victim mentality, John, and I do my best to not surround myself with people who are always freaking complaining all the time.
Yeah.
Just look in the mirror and take ownership for what's going on. Stop blaming people.
I've referenced it on the podcast before. Have you ever heard of the book Hero on a Mission by Donald Miller?
100%.
I mean,
I'm a big fan of his.
His stuff's awesome.
Yeah.
The victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide, right? At some point in your story of life, you're going to have to pick, which one you're going to be,
Yeah.
I think it's such a powerful, powerful message. So you had mentioned it and we didn't really talk about it. Talk a little bit about the Learn It All podcast.
Well, I hope you come on at some time.
I'd be
Uh,
honored.
yeah, no, I'd love to have you. I would say, long story short, I wrote a book called The Learnit Leader about April of 2023. Wasn't really sure I was going to do much with it, but some people liked it, and I got on the podcast. I started jumping on a bunch of shows, and at first I wasn't very good. But the more you do it, the better you get. And I made a bunch of friends along the way, and who are podcast hosts, and they said, "Damon, you should really do this. It's a great experience. You meet great people, and for
Yeah,
somebody
me too.
like me, John, who likes to learn, I get an hour. I mean, I interviewed Stephen Covey and Doug Conant and some amazing people, and I get an hour of their time learning from them, and it's just been an amazing experience. And I just love to hear people who are humble enough to share their stories and give some practical advice. And I don't know, I'm almost kind of obsessed with doing it these days. I mean, I got my day job. My wife laughs at me. She's like, "You're always working on your podcast stuff," but I think it's a great adjacent tool for Learnit, because people get to walk away with conversations around what are great leaders doing, how do people deal with identity crisis, stories of making mistakes that you could learn from. So I'm just like with what you're doing. It's just been a fabulous ride, and I really enjoy it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I talk about podcasting today, and you have it behind you, that, you know, you didn't have YouTube and you didn't have all these things that, when we had to, walk barefoot in the snow and all of that. But
Yeah.
like you had to crack open a book, and your learning was really at the level of how fast you could process the book and get through it and all that. But today, my point is I remember as a kid, my mom like so excited to buy a set of encyclopedias, right? And they sat on the bookshelf in the
The
living room.
Britannica. Yeah. The
Yep,
whole.
Encyclopedia
Yeah.
Britannica, and you had the whole
Yeah.
world in your hands, they said, right?
Totally.
But podcasting today is the encyclopedia. Podcasting to me is the world opens up because people share their story. It's real life, and you can get it, so fast, and you're getting it real, and it's live, and there's so many of them. I just that's why I do it, why I love being on them, because you're really contributing. You're putting it out there for people to get things maybe they didn't have access to before. And you never know, right? Somebody's going to hear your story and resonate with it, and that can create change, and you make an impact on the world.
And that's just kind of like what I want to do. I mean, I hopefully that there's this, whatever I have to say resonates with somebody, and maybe that helps them overcome imposter syndrome. Say, for instance, you're out there, like you see a job you want to apply for, but you don't feel like you're qualified for it, and you're like, "Oh, I heard that guy Damon on John's podcast, Man, a podcast," and it's like, well, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, I just don't get the job. Well, you might get the job, So
Right.
making a difference. I tell people you should start your own podcast. I mean, I think especially if you have a niche, I think it's a great way to meet people and get your story out and share your wisdom. I think a lot of us have more to offer than we give ourselves credit for, and you learn so much through the process. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the whole podcasting world.
I love it. I love it. So last question, how do, besides the Learn It All podcast, how do people find you and follow you? I know we met on LinkedIn, which is common way.
And thank you for connecting with me. I would say connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi. That's probably number one. You can pick up my book on Amazon, The Learn It All Leader, and but please check out the Learn It All podcast. So do that, but definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, Damon, thank you for being here today. There's a lot. I think imposter syndrome is a very real thing, right? But I love your framework. I really love your framework, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an honor to be here.